Selawar had spent his entire life buried in records. That was the purpose of the Vaethari, to remember, to archive, to make sure no piece of galactic history was ever lost. His species had long, thin bodies covered in plates of dark chitin, 4 arms perfect for sorting through data screens, and compound eyes that could read 6 documents at once. He lived in the deepest basement of the conquered archives on the station world of Paleth, surrounded by more information than any single mind could hold. He loved it. For 300 years, Selawar had cataloged forgotten stars, dead civilizations, and ancient trade routes that nobody used anymore. He had never found anything that truly surprised him. The galaxy was old, and most of its secrets had been found, recorded, and filed away long ago. Until today. It started with a map. Not a modern one, a fragment from the oldest layer of the archives, dating back over 12,000 galactic years to the time of the Oricin, the species that had founded the conquered before vanishing into extinction. Selawar had been cross-referencing old navigation charts with current ones, looking for small errors to correct. Simple, boring work, the kind he enjoyed most. But then he found a hole. An entire region of space, roughly 800 cubic light-years around an unremarkable yellow star in the Orion Arm, had been erased. Not lost, not corrupted, erased, deliberately and carefully removed from every single copy of every single map in the archives. In its place was a glyph he had never seen before, written in a language so old that even the translation systems could not read it. Selawar stared at the glyph for a long time. In 3 centuries of work, he had never seen anything like it. Data was sometimes lost, it was sometimes damaged, but it was never hidden. The conquered did not believe in secrets. Every species, every world, every star was recorded openly for all to see. So why had someone gone to such effort to make sure no one ever looked at this particular star? He brought his finding to the Circle of Remembrance the next morning. The Circle was the elder council that governed the archives, 12 beings from 12 species, each one ancient and respected. Selawar had expected curiosity, perhaps excitement. What he got instead was silence. Cold, heavy silence. The eldest member, a Dasari named Gorath whose scales had turned white with age, looked at Selawar with an expression he had never seen on any elder's face before. It was fear. "Destroy the record," Gorath said quietly. "Forget what you found, this is not for you." Selawar's antennae twitched. "Destroy it, we are archivists, we do not destroy." "You will destroy it," Gorath repeated. His voice was harder now. "And you will never speak of this again." The other elders said nothing. Some of them looked away. One of them, a Melori with soft blue feathers, was trembling. Selawar left the chamber in stunned silence. He did not destroy the record. Instead, he copied it onto a private data chip and spent 3 days thinking about what to do next. On the 4th day, he contacted Thyra Mock. Captain Thyra Mock was not the kind of person the archives usually dealt with. She was Rithani, a tall, broad-shouldered species with gray skin and deep-set eyes that always looked tired. She had once been a respected fleet commander in the conquered navy, but a series of disagreements with her superiors had ended her career. Now, she ran a salvage ship called the Drifting Verdict on the outer rim of the galaxy, picking through the wreckage of old battles and abandoned stations for anything she could sell. She was rough, practical, and owed nothing to the conquered. Selawar needed exactly that. They met on a trading station in the Keth Nebula. Selawar showed her the erased map, the ancient glyph, the coordinates that someone had tried very hard to hide. "Why me?" Thyra asked, leaning back in her chair and studying him with those tired eyes. "Because you have a ship, you have no loyalty to the Circle, and you are the kind of person who wants to know what is inside a locked room." Thyra smiled. It was a thin, dangerous smile. "How do you know I will not just sell this information?" "To whom? No one knows it exists. No one even knows there is something to find." She thought about it for 2 days. Then she said yes. The crew of the drifting verdict was small, 6 beings in total, including Selawar. The ship was old but fast, held together by creative repairs and stubbornness. They jumped through 3 relay points to reach the edge of the erased zone, and then flew the rest of the way on conventional engines, dropping out of faster-than-light travel to avoid tripping any alarms. When they arrived, Selawar felt his heart sink. There was nothing there, no stations, no fleets, no signals, just a quiet yellow star burning alone in the dark, orbited by 8 planets of various sizes. It looked like any of a billion other unremarkable systems scattered across the galaxy. But then Thyra pointed at the 3rd planet from the star. The sensors were going wild. The planet was radiating electromagnetic signals, not a few, not dozens, but billions. Overlapping, chaotic, unstructured, filling every frequency band. Radio, microwave, infrared, visible light, the noise was deafening, but none of it was pointed outward. Every single signal was directed inward, bouncing between points on the surface and in nearby orbit. The entire civilization was talking constantly, endlessly, furiously, but only to itself. "They do not even know we are here," Selawar whispered. Thyra was not looking at the planet. She was looking at something else, a faint energy reading that surrounded the entire solar system like a bubble. It was enormous, stretching billions of kilometers in every direction, and it was nearly invisible. If they had not been this close, they would never have detected it. "What is that?" she asked. Selawar ran the analysis 3 times before he believed it. The energy signature matched Conquered technology. Old Conquered technology. Older than any he had ever seen. It was a cloaking construct, a veil, and it was bending light, gravity, and subspace around the entire system, making it invisible to every known method of detection in the galaxy. Someone had built a cage around the star, and inside that cage, a civilization had grown without ever knowing the cage existed. "They did not hide themselves," Selawar said, his voice barely a whisper. "Someone hid them." Thyra stared at the readings for a long time. Then she looked at the blue-green planet below, teeming with life and noise and chaos, and she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt afraid. The veil was not just a wall. It was a machine, ancient, vast, and still running after 12,000 years. Its maintenance systems floated in the dark space between the outer planets of the system, silent satellites the size of small moons, each one covered in writing that no living species could read. But Selawar could. It took him 4 days to crack the language. It was Old Orison, the original tongue of the Conquered's founders, a species that had disappeared from the galaxy so long ago that most people thought they were a myth. Selawar had studied their records for decades. He knew fragments of their language better than anyone alive. What he found in the Veil's memory banks changed everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. The logs were organized by date, stretching back 12,400 years. They told a story, not a pleasant one. The Orison had been explorers. They were the first species in the Milky Way to develop faster-than-light travel, and they had used it to map every corner of the galaxy. They discovered thousands of worlds with life, hundreds with civilizations at various stages of development. They watched, they recorded, and when a species was ready, they made contact and welcomed them into the growing community that would one day become the Conquered. They had a system for evaluating new species, a set of mathematical models that could take a civilization's current state, its technology, its culture, its biology, and project how it would develop over the next 100,000 years. The models were remarkably accurate. They had predicted the rise of the Rithani, the Dasari, the Melori, and dozens of other species with an error rate of less than 3%. Then, 12,400 years ago, an Orison survey ship entered a quiet solar system in the Orion Arm and found a small blue planet teeming with primitive life. The dominant species was barely past its Bronze Age, simple tools, simple buildings, small communities scattered across the surface. Nothing remarkable, Nothing unusual. The galaxy was full of species at this stage. The Orison ran their models, and the models broke. Sellower read the results 3 times. The numbers did not make sense. Every other species in the galaxy had followed a predictable curve, slow growth over tens of thousands of years, with long periods of stability between major advances. The curve for these creatures, these humans, was almost vertical. The models predicted full technological maturity in under 10,000 years. That alone was terrifying. The fastest species in conquered history had taken 42,000 years to reach the same point, but the Orison's fear went deeper than speed. Every other species eventually stopped changing. Once they mastered their environment, they settled. They found a comfortable level of technology and culture, and they stayed there, sometimes for millions of years. It was natural. It was healthy. It was how civilizations survived. The models predicted that humans would never stop. They would keep changing, keep adapting, keep pushing forward, absorbing every new idea they encountered and transforming it into something different. The Orison had a name for it. They called it recursive ascension, a feedback loop of invention and adaptation that had no theoretical ceiling. The chief scientist on the survey ship had written a single note in the margin of the report. Sellower translated it slowly, his 4 hands trembling. It read, "This species does not plateau. It does not rest. It does not stop. If it is allowed to reach the stars, it will change the shape of the galaxy within a single generation." The Orison debated for 11 years. Some wanted to destroy the humans. Some wanted to contact them early and guide their development. Some wanted to do nothing and simply watch. In the end, they chose a 4th option. They built the Veil. It was the largest engineering project in Orison history. Thousands of ships, millions of workers, decades of construction. When it was finished, the entire solar system vanished from the galaxy's view. No light escaped. No signals got out. No scanner could penetrate the barrier. To the rest of the universe, the yellow star and its planets simply did not exist. The Orison then created the Quarantine Doctrine, a secret law passed from one leader of the conquered to the next, known only to the highest authorities. The law was simple. Humanity would be left alone, hidden, monitored from outside the veil but never contacted, never influenced, never interfered with. They would develop in complete isolation, following whatever path their nature took them. The doctrine had one final line, and Sellower read it aloud to the crew in a voice that shook. "Let them reach the stars on their own, or not at all, but never let them reach the stars through us." Thyra listened to all of this in silence. When Sellower finished, she walked to the sensor console without a word and pulled up the latest readings of the Veil. What she saw confirmed her worst suspicion. The Veil was dying. 12,000 years of continuous operation had taken their toll. Microfractures were spreading through the subspace lattice that held the construct together. The energy output was declining by measurable amounts every year. At the current rate of decay, the Veil would collapse completely within 20 to 30 years. And when it did, the solar system would suddenly appear on every star map, every sensor array, and every navigation system in the galaxy. 4,000 civilizations would discover, all at once, that a hidden species had been growing in the dark for 12 millennia. But there was something else, something that made Thyra's gray skin go pale. The humans were already pushing at the walls. Their ships, primitive by galactic standards but remarkably clever in design, had spread across their solar system. They had colonies on the 4th planet. They had stations in the asteroid belt. They had research vessels probing the outer edges of the system, pressing closer and closer to the Veil's inner boundary. They did not know what the boundary was. They could not see it. But their instruments had detected something, a faint energy reading, an unexplained resistance in the fabric of space. And instead of turning back, they had built bigger instruments and pushed harder. Thyra pulled up the trajectory projections. At their current rate of expansion, Human ships would physically contact the Veil's inner wall within 5 to 8 years, long before the Veil collapsed on its own. She sat back in her chair and stared at the blue planet on the viewscreen. Billions of creatures down there, living their lives, building their machines, arguing and dreaming and fighting and creating, completely unaware that they were inside a cage built by beings who had been terrified of what they might become. And despite the cage, despite 12,000 years of isolation, despite having no help and no knowledge of the wider galaxy, they had clawed their way from bronze tools to interplanetary civilization. They had done in 6,000 years what most species took 60,000 to achieve. The Orison had been afraid of them. Looking at the numbers, Thyra understood why. She turned to Selawar. "They were caged for 12,000 years," she said quietly, "and they still almost got out on their own." Selawar said nothing. He was looking at the data, running calculations he did not want to finish. Because the Orison's models had predicted humans would reach technological maturity in 10,000 years, that prediction had assumed they would have access to galactic knowledge and trade, like every other species. Locked away in the dark, with nothing but themselves, they were ahead of schedule. Thyra made the decision alone. She did not ask the crew to vote. She did not consult Selawar. She simply turned the drifting verdict toward the inner boundary of the Veil and flew through it. The transition was strange. For a brief moment, every sensor on the ship went dark, as if the universe itself had blinked. Then they were inside, and the solar system unfolded around them in full clarity. The yellow star burning steady at the center, the planets turning in their ancient orbits, and everywhere, the noise of human civilization filling every frequency like a storm that never ended. They were detected in less than 9 seconds. Thyra had expected minutes, maybe hours. She had assumed that a species this young would have gaps in their sensor coverage, blind spots that a small ship could slip through. She was wrong. The humans had built a sprawling detection network, thousands of stations scattered between the fourth planet and the asteroid belt, each one watching a different slice of space with instruments that were crude by galactic standards but remarkably thorough. Within 30 seconds of crossing the Veil, the drifting verdict was surrounded by signals, scanning pulses, communication requests, and what were unmistakably targeting locks from weapons platforms. The humans could not have known what they were looking at. They had never seen an alien ship before, but their first instinct had been to point guns at it while simultaneously trying to talk to it. Thyra almost laughed. It was such a perfectly human response, though she did not know that yet. Contact was made through mathematics. Selawar transmitted a sequence of prime numbers, the universal language of any species that understood basic science. The response came back in 41 seconds. Not just an echo of the primes, but an extension of the sequence, followed by a rapid burst of additional mathematical structures. The humans were not just acknowledging the signal, they were showing off. 2 hours later, the drifting verdict was escorted by a formation of 6 human warships to a massive station orbiting the fourth planet, Mars, the humans called it. The station was called Ares Station, and it was the headquarters of Earth's interstellar exploration program. The warships were ugly by galactic standards, blocky, angular, covered in visible armor plating and external weapon mounts. They lacked the smooth elegance of conquered vessel design, but Selawar noticed something that troubled him. The ships were not built from a single design philosophy. Each one was slightly different hull shapes, different weapon configurations, different engine layouts. It was as if 6 different teams had each built their own version of the same ship, and no one had bothered to standardize. He would later learn that this was not a flaw, it was a feature. Director Lena Vasic met them in the station's main conference hall. She was smaller than Thyra had expected, a compact woman with dark hair cut short, steady brown eyes, and the kind of calm that came not from peace but from absolute control. She wore a simple gray uniform with no decorations. She did not smile when she saw them, but she did not reach for a weapon either. She studied each member of the crew with an expression that Thyra found unsettling. It was the look of someone who was cataloging everything, measuring, assessing, filing away details for later use. Thyra had seen that look before, usually on intelligence officers. "You are the first non-human beings we have ever met," Vasek said. Her voice was even and clear. "I have a great many questions, but I suspect you have come here to tell me something, so I will let you speak first." Thyra told her everything. The veil, the orison, the quarantine doctrine, 12,000 years of deliberate isolation, a galaxy of 4,000 civilizations that had been told, generation after generation, that the quiet yellow star in the Orion arm was empty. Vasek listened without interrupting. When Thyra finished, the director was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that Thyra had not expected. "We knew." The room went still. "Not the details," Vasek continued. "Not the history, but we knew something was there. Our physicists detected an energy anomaly at the edge of the solar system 37 years ago, a shell of distorted space that did not match any natural phenomenon. We called it the boundary. We have been trying to understand it and break through it ever since." She paused, and for the first time something close to emotion flickered across her face. Not anger, not fear. Something harder to name, a deep, cold patience, like a river that had been pressing against a dam for decades. "You are telling me that the boundary was built by an alien civilization to keep us contained," Vasek said. "That does not surprise me. What surprises me is that it took this long for someone to come and tell us." Selawar spoke then, carefully. "Director Vasek, the orison hid your species because their models predicted you would develop at a rate that threatened the stability of the galaxy. They believed you were dangerous." Vasek looked at him. "Were they wrong?" Selawar did not answer. "What I want to know," Vasek said, leaning forward, "is what you are afraid we will do." The question hung in the air. Thyra shifted uncomfortably. Selawar's antennae pressed flat against his skull. None of them had an answer, because the truth was that no one in the galaxy had ever been able to answer that question. The fear of humanity had always been about what they might become, not what they were. Meanwhile, the news of the Veil's decay had reached the conquered capital. The Circle of Remembrance convened an emergency session, the first in over 1,000 years. The chamber was vast, built to hold representatives of every species in the conquered, but today only the inner circle was present. 12 elders, 12 species, all of them afraid. The debate split the circle into 3 factions. The Preservers, led by Gorath, argued that the Veil must be rebuilt. If the technology to do so no longer existed, then the system must be sterilized, the star destabilized, the planets rendered uninhabitable, the species eliminated before it could spread. It was, Gorath argued, the only way to ensure galactic safety. The rationalists argued for contact and slow integration. Bring the humans into the conquered under heavy supervision. Limit their access to technology. Guide their development over centuries until they were stable enough to participate as equals. The fearful, the largest faction, wanted only more time. They proposed sending an armada to the Sol system to observe and contain, while the Circle decided on a longer-term solution. The fearful won. A diplomatic fleet was assembled, 47 warships under the command of Grand Admiral Corvith of the Dasari, a veteran commander with cold, yellow eyes and a reputation for efficiency. The fleet's official mission was observation. Unofficially, it carried enough firepower to burn every city on the blue planet to glass. Back on Ares Station, Selawar spent 3 days sharing the Orison's original projections with human scientists at Vasek's request. They studied the data with a focus and speed that made Selawar's compound eyes ache. They asked questions he could not answer. They found errors in the orison models that no conquered scientist had noticed in 12,000 years. On the fourth day, Vasek called Selwar to her office. She was holding a data tablet with the Orisin's projections on one side and humanity's actual development timeline on the other. She looked at him, and for the first time she smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed something she had always suspected. "Your founders predicted we would reach technological maturity in 10,000 years, she said. "We did it in 6, and we did it in a cage." She set the tablet down. "Imagine what we will do now that the door is open." Selwar said nothing, but deep in his chest, where his twin hearts beat in careful rhythm, he felt the same thing Thyra had felt when they first entered the system. He felt afraid, and for the first time in his long life, he also felt something close to awe. Grand Admiral Corvith's fleet arrived in the Sol system like a fist closing around a throat. 47 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, their hulls gleaming with the layered armor of conquered military engineering. They filled the space between Mars and Jupiter, and every human sensor array in the system lit up at once. Corvith was Dasari, a reptilian species with thick armored scales, powerful limbs, and a military tradition stretching back 20,000 years. He had fought in 9 campaigns, commanded fleets in 3 wars, and never once lost a battle. He did not hate humans. He did not fear them the way the elders did. He simply saw them as a problem to be managed, and he was very good at managing problems. He opened communications with Ares Station within an hour of arrival. His message was polite but firm. The Conquered recognized humanity as a developing species with remarkable potential. In the interest of galactic stability, humanity would be offered a guided integration protocol, a structured program of technological and cultural supervision lasting 500 years. During this period, human expansion beyond the Sol system would be restricted. Human technology would be monitored and regulated. Human military development would be frozen at current levels. In exchange, humanity would receive access to galactic trade, knowledge, and diplomatic channels. In 5 centuries, if the process went well, they would be granted full membership in the Conquered. It was, Corvith believed, a generous offer, far more generous than what the Preservers had wanted. Director Vasek's response came in 12 minutes. It was brief. She declined. Corvith was not surprised. He had read the intelligence reports. He knew Vasek's reputation, a woman who had risen through Earth's military and political ranks not through aggression, but through a patient, relentless refusal to accept limits that others placed on her. She would not accept a cage, no matter how comfortable. He requested a direct meeting. Vasek agreed. They met on Ares Station in the same conference hall where Thyra had first explained the veil. Corvith brought 2 guards. Vasek came alone. She did not argue against the guided integration protocol with emotion. She argued with data. She had prepared a full presentation of human technological development, not just the highlights but the details. Fusion energy, achieved independently. Quantum computing, developed from theoretical mathematics without any outside influence. Bioengineering that had extended the average human lifespan to over 150 years. And most remarkably, a working theoretical framework for faster-than-light travel that human physicists had assembled by studying the faint energy signatures leaking through the veil. They had reverse-engineered the basic principles of FTL from the walls of their own prison. "We do not need 500 years of guidance," Vasek said calmly. "We do not need supervision. We need partnership, equals working beside equals." Corvith studied her for a long time. He respected her composure. He even respected her argument. But his orders were clear, and his assessment of the strategic situation had not changed. Humanity was too fast, too unpredictable, and too young. Partnership with a species that had been in space for only a few centuries was not just unwise, it was dangerous. "The offer stands," he said. "I suggest you reconsider." And if we refuse? Corvith said nothing. He did not need to. The 47 warships outside the station spoke clearly enough. The tension held for 2 days. Human and conquered ships watched each other across the dark. Communications were tense and formal. On Earth, governments debated furiously. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to accept the conquered's terms and take what they could get. Then the signal came. It tore through every conquered communication channel like a scream, a priority distress call on a frequency that had not been used in thousands of years. It came from the galaxy's far edge, from the frontier systems where the conquered's borders met the empty void between galaxies. The Hollow had returned. Corvith's blood ran cold when he read the report. The Hollow was the oldest nightmare in the galaxy, a swarm of biomechanical entities that consumed everything in their path. Stars, planets, stations, fleets. The Hollow did not conquer. It ate. 12,000 years ago, it had devoured the Oricin homeworld and 3 surrounding systems before the combined forces of every species in the young conquered had driven it back into the intergalactic void. The cost had been catastrophic. The Oricin themselves had never recovered, fading into extinction within a few centuries. The Hollow had been declared destroyed. It had not been destroyed. It had been waiting. 3 frontier systems were already gone. The Conquered's border fleets had engaged and been overwhelmed in hours. The Hollow adapted to weapons fire after the first volley, growing resistant to energy weapons, kinetic impacts, and even antimatter warheads with terrifying speed. Conquered military projections estimated that the combined might of every fleet in the galaxy could slow the Hollow's advance for 2 years at most. After that, nothing would stop it. Corvith recalled his fleet within the hour. Every ship in the Conquered was being pulled to the front. He sent a final message to Vasek before he left. It was short and sharp. "Stay behind the veil, humans. This is not your war." Vasek watched the Conquered fleet jump away. The conference hall was empty now, just her and the stars outside the window. Thyra, who had stayed on the station as a liaison, stood nearby. She had heard the reports. She knew what the Hollow was. She knew what it could do. "They cannot win," Thyra said quietly. "Not alone." Vasek turned to her. "Tell me everything you know about the Hollow, every detail, every weakness, every failed strategy." Thyra told her. It took 3 hours. When she was finished, Vasek called a meeting with every military commander, every lead scientist, and every head of government on Earth and in the colonies. The meeting was broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. She told them what was coming. She told them that the galaxy that had kept them caged for 12,000 years was now facing extinction. She told them that the Conquered had asked them to stay behind, to hide, to let the rest of the galaxy fight and die while humanity sat safe inside its prison. Then she asked a simple question: "Are we the kind of species that hides?" The answer was unanimous. Within 72 hours, Earth's governments had unified under a joint military command, the fastest political consolidation in human history. Every factory, every research lab, every shipyard in the solar system was redirected to a single purpose. Human engineers tore into the Veil's subspace technology with a ferocity that stunned Selwar. Teams worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, burning through problems that Conquered scientists had said would take centuries to solve. Selwar watched them work. He saw something in them that he had never seen in any other species. It was not intelligence. Many Conquered species were more intelligent than humans. It was not discipline. The Dasari were far more disciplined. It was something else entirely. It was hunger, a deep, burning refusal to be told that something was impossible. They cracked the Veil's FTL technology in 43 days. Not a rough understanding, not a theoretical framework. A working, functional, faster-than-light drive built from reverse-engineered alien technology and human ingenuity, assembled in orbital shipyards that had been repurposed from commercial stations. On the 44th day, the first human FTL-capable warship launched from Earth orbit. By the end of the month, there were hundreds. Across the galaxy, on the crumbling front lines where the Hollow was devouring system after system, conquered long-range sensors detected something that made every officer on every ship stop and stare. A new fleet signature was emerging from the Sol system. It was massive. It was moving at speeds that the Conquered's models said were impossible for a species with less than 50 days of FTL experience. The humans were coming, and they were coming fast. The front line was dying. Corvith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Ironskill, and watched the tactical display with the expression of a man watching a funeral. 12 species had already abandoned their homeworlds. The Melori had lost their entire home system in a single day. The Hollow consumed everything, ships, stations, moons, planets, breaking them down into raw material and building more of itself. For every swarm unit the Conquered destroyed, 10 more appeared. The worst part was the adaptation. The Conquered would develop a new weapon, deploy it, and watch it tear through the Hollow's formations for exactly one engagement. By the second engagement, the Hollow had already evolved resistance. Energy weapons, kinetic rounds, antimatter warheads, gravitic distortion fields, each worked once and never again. Corvith had pulled his remaining forces back to the threshold of Orn, a narrow passage between two galactic arms where the density of stars created natural choke points. It was the last defensible position before the galactic core. If the threshold fell, there would be nothing between the Hollow and the densely populated inner systems where trillions of beings lived. His fleet was at 40% strength. Morale was shattered. 3 of his senior captains had stopped responding to communications, not because they were dead, but because they had simply given up. Thyra had been serving as a liaison between the Conquered fleet and the retreating civilian convoys. She found Corvith alone in his ready room on the evening, before what everyone believed would be the final battle. "We cannot win this," he said. It was not a complaint. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the cold precision of a career soldier who had run out of options. "The Hollow adapts faster than we can innovate. We have exhausted every tactical doctrine, every weapon system, every strategy in the Conquered's arsenal. We have nothing left." "You might not need anything left," Thyra said. "They are coming." Corvith looked at her. "The humans." He said the word like it tasted strange. One species with a fleet built in weeks, using technology they barely understand. What can they possibly do that 4,000 civilizations could not? Thyra did not answer. She did not need to. 12 hours later, the answer arrived. The humans did not come with one fleet. They came with 7. Each fleet was built around a completely different combat philosophy. The first used long-range energy weapons designed to saturate entire sectors with overlapping fields of fire. The second carried kinetic weapons of staggering power, solid slugs, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The third deployed clouds of autonomous drones that communicated with each other through quantum-linked networks, thinking and adapting as a single distributed mind. The fourth was built for close combat, with ships armored so heavily they could ram through hollow formations and survive. The fifth used experimental weapons that folded space itself, creating pockets of distorted reality that crushed anything caught inside. The sixth was a carrier fleet, launching thousands of small, fast attack craft piloted by humans who had volunteered knowing the survival odds were nearly zero. The seventh was something no one in the Conquered had ever seen: ships that could repair themselves mid-battle, growing new hull plating and weapon systems from raw materials harvested from debris. 7 fleets, 7 doctrines, 7 completely different answers to the same question. The Hollow had survived for millennia because it could adapt to any single threat. It had never faced 7 simultaneous threats, each one changing faster than it could respond. Director Vasic commanded from the carrier Prometheus, a ship that had been a commercial transport 6 weeks ago and was now the most advanced command platform in the system. She did not lead the way the Conquered expected leaders to lead from above, with careful plans and rigid hierarchies. She led from the middle, constantly communicating with every fleet, every captain, every squadron, adjusting strategy in real time based on what was working and what was not. When the first engagement began at the outer edge of the threshold, the Hollow reacted the way it always did. It absorbed the first wave of attacks, adapted, and pushed forward. The Conquered officers watching from the Ironskill felt their hope dim. Then Vasek switched tactics. The energy weapon fleet pulled back. The kinetic fleet surged forward. The Hollow began adapting to kinetic impacts, and the drone fleet hit them from the flank with weapons that did not exist 10 minutes ago, designed and deployed by the drone network's own evolving intelligence. The Hollow shifted to counter the drones, and the space-folding fleet tore holes in their formation from below. Every time the Hollow adapted to one threat, another appeared. Every time it found a defense, the humans changed the attack. The pace was relentless, chaotic, and utterly without pattern. The Conquered's military doctrine was built on precision and predictability, unified fleets executing coordinated plans. The humans fought like a storm, each element independent but somehow working in concert, their commanders making decisions in seconds that Conquered officers would have debated for hours. Corvith watched the battle unfold on his tactical display with an expression he had never worn before. It was not fear, not admiration, not confusion. It was recognition. He was watching something new, a way of fighting that no species in the galaxy had ever attempted because no species in the galaxy thought the way humans did. The Hollow, for the first time in 12,000 years of recorded history, began to lose ground. The battle raged for 9 days. 9 days of constant engagement, of shifting tactics and evolving weapons, of human pilots flying missions with no sleep and human engineers rebuilding damaged ships while the fighting continued around them. The Hollow threw everything it had at the threshold, wave after wave of biomechanical nightmares, each one more adapted than the last. And each time, the humans adapted faster. On the 9th day, Vasek executed the final maneuver. Human astrophysicists had identified 3 dying stars near the threshold, bloated red giants at the end of their lives, their cores already unstable. Over the previous 4 days, while the battle raged, human engineering teams had quietly placed devices deep inside each star. At Vasek's signal, the devices activated. The 3 stars collapsed in a precise sequence, each detonation triggering the next, creating a cascading gravitational wave that swept through the threshold like a tide. The wave funneled the Hollow swarm into a narrow corridor of space, a kill zone barely a light-year across. Every ship fired at once, human and Conquered together, 7 fleets and the remnants of the Conquered navy, pouring everything they had into a single devastating volley that lasted 11 minutes. When the light faded, the Hollow was gone. Not retreating, not regrouping, gone. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, that had consumed the Orison and nearly consumed everything else, had been annihilated in a corridor of fire between 3 collapsing stars. The silence that followed was the deepest silence the galaxy had ever known. Sellower wrote the entry himself. He sat in a quiet room on the Ironskill, surrounded by data screens filled with battle reports and casualty figures and sensor logs, and he wrote the official record for the Conquered archives. He recorded the details of the battle with precision and care. And when he reached the section for species designation, the formal name by which humanity would be known in every record, every map, every document for the rest of galactic history, he set down his instruments and thought for a long time. Then he wrote a single word, unbound. The Circle of Remembrance repealed the quarantine doctrine 3 days later. The vote was unanimous for the first time in the Circle's history. The Veil's remaining systems were shut down and dismantled. Earth's sun appeared on galactic star maps, and 4,000 civilizations saw it for the first time. A small, ordinary yellow star that had been hidden in plain sight for 12,000 years. Across the galaxy, the reaction was complicated. There was fear, certainly. There was resentment. There was suspicion and distrust and all the other things that come when a new power arrives on the stage. But there was also something else, a grudging, bewildered respect for a species that had been locked in the dark and had emerged not broken, not bitter, but ready. On the observation deck of the Prometheus, Director Vasek stood beside Grand Admiral Corvith. The battle was over. The fleet was recovering. Outside the windows, the stars of the threshold shone steady and calm, as if nothing had happened. Corvith had been silent for a long time. He was not a being who expressed emotion easily. His species valued control, discipline, and order above all things. But something had shifted in him over the past 9 days, something fundamental that he did not entirely understand. He turned to Vasek. "I must ask you something," he said, "a question that has haunted every leader in the Conquered since the day the Veil was built." Vasek looked at him. She waited. "What would have happened if we had not hidden you?" Corvith asked. "If the Orison had made contact 12,000 years ago, when your kind was still building with bronze and stone, if you had been given access to galactic knowledge, galactic technology, galactic trade from the very beginning, what would you have become?" Vasek was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the stars, the same stars that her ancestors had watched from open fields, from castle walls, from the windows of spacecraft, never knowing that the light they saw was filtered through a cage designed to keep them small. Then she smiled. It was a real smile this time, warm and fierce, and full of something that Corvith had no word for in his language. "You would have had to keep up," she said. Corvith stared at her. Then, for the first time in his life, the Grand Admiral of the Conquered Navy laughed. Outside, the stars burned on, and the galaxy, changed and shaken and uncertain, turned its eyes toward a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, and wondered what would happen next. No one knew the answer, but for the first time in 12,000 years, they would not have to wonder in the dark.